India is really big. Trust me, this is the type of groundbreaking insight that you won't find anywhere else. With a population of almost 1.4 billion people, approximately 17.5% of the entire world's population lives in India. That makes India the second most populous nation on Earth, behind China, though India's population is expected to exceed China's by 2027 and to retain top spot until the end of the century. Despite having an enormous population though, India hasn't produced a single footballer that have gone on to enjoy any kind of meaningful success in one of the world's major leagues. India have qualified for the World Cup once in 1950, but they declined the invitation, for a myriad of different reasons that I covered in a documentary about the subject just a little while back, which also covered some of the reasons behind India's struggles on the international stage, and in football more broadly, so I'll try not to tread on old ground. It's not just India though, the Asian and particularly South Asian diasporas have long struggled to produce great footballers. Take Britain for instance. Around 5% of the population of the United Kingdom is of South Asian origin, primarily from India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, who previously formed the colonial British Raj, which was often described as being the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. That is about the same size as the UK's Welsh population, but whilst Wales are 19th in the FIFA World Rankings and reached a European Championship semi-final as recently as 2016, you can count on one hand the number of British South Asians to have played even at championship level or above. But there are some signs that the tide is finally turning. Hamza Chowdhury, whose mother and stepfather are both Bengalis, is the most high-profile example, playing for Leicester City in the Premier League and the Europa League. Chowdhury is of Bangladeshi Grenadian ancestry though, and therefore is not eligible to play for India, ruling him out of this video. If you are new to this series, essentially I take a pool of every player who is, and every player who could have been, eligible for a specific national team, and then I create the best starting 11 and 7-man bench based upon the player's talents right now. It is a pretty long-running series by this stage, so if you enjoyed this one, feel free to go back and watch some of the others, from fellow big nations like the United States and Nigeria, to some more obscure and perhaps surprising ones like Suriname and Martinique. Yes, the intros are always this long, if that's what you were thinking. In fact, usually they are longer because I give a bit of a background about the country in question, but I will be terse with India, given that its history ought to be very well known. Inhabited by modern humans for at least 55,000 years, India was one of the wealthiest countries in the world during the 17th century, accounting for between 25 to 35% of the world's GDP, at a time when Britain accounted for just 2.9%. By 1947, when India gained independence again, following centuries of brutal and barbaric British rule, it accounted for just 2% of the world's GDP, making India one of the poorest countries on Earth, a legacy which the country is still recovering from now. India's men's national football team is currently ranked 107th in the world, and whilst there is huge support for the sport in regions such as Kerala and West Bengal, that has not yet translated into producing top-class talent. Without further ado then, here is what the Indian men's national football team could look like if every player eligible to represent the Blue Tigers had chosen to do so. Goalkeeper: Gurpreet Singh Sanghdhu. It is a recurring theme within this series that the goalkeeper tends to be either the weakest position or, at the very least, is often the position with the least amount of competition. That is the case once again with India, where our goalkeeper is one of a very small number of actual Indian internationals to have even made my shortlist. Gurpreet Singh Sanghdhu is India's outstanding goalkeeper at this moment in time, having been his country's number one since the age of 24, now aged 29 with 48 caps to his name. Sanghdhu is a towering presence between the sticks, standing at 6 foot 6 inches tall, which allows him to rarely command his 6-yard box. Born in Mumbai, Sanghdhu previously spent 3 years as a backup keeper with Stabæk in Norway, but has been Bengaluru's number one in the Indian Super League since 2017, where he has twice won the division's Golden Glove. Right back: Gabriel Clerc. Alright, admittedly, We haven't begun with a couple of players who are likely to be nominated for the Ballon d'Or anytime soon, but Gabriel Clerc is an interesting inclusion. Born in Sydney, Australia, Clerc spent time in the Marconi Stallions youth ranks, the same club who helped develop the likes of Christian Vieri, Harry Kewell, and Mark Schwarzer. Clerc moved to Italy in 2015, when he was only 17, joining Serie B side Virtus Entella. Clerc still plays for the club from Liguria, following a couple of loan moves, though they now compete in Serie C. A quick, attack-minded fullback or wingback, Clerc has made 7 appearances for Australia at under 23 level, meaning he could, theoretically, still choose to represent India at senior level should he wish. Clerc's mother is Italian, meanwhile his father is half English and half Indian, meaning Clerc has the choice of Italy, Australia, England, or India on the big stage, and one suspects he would win the most caps for the last of that quartet. Centre-back, Danny Batth. The first big name in this 11, if we can call him that, though certainly not the last, Danny Batth has been a stalwart in the second tier of English football for a number of years. A graduate of the Wolverhampton Wanderers youth ranks, Batth went on to make more than 200 appearances for his boyhood club, who are currently 10th in the Premier League table. Batth featured fairly frequently under Nuno Espirito Santo as Wolves won promotion, but he never featured in the top flight and was eventually sold to Stoke City for £3 million. Batth is now closing in on 100 appearances at the Britannia Stadium, but it was during his time at Wolves that the now 31-year-old expressed an interest in representing India. Batth's father is Punjabi and moved to Britain when he was 12 years old. That means that Batth is half Indian and is therefore eligible to represent India as per FIFA's eligibility criteria. But oddly enough, not by India's, or not by that alone at least. The India national team doesn't allow dual nationals to represent them, meaning that Batth would have to not only claim Indian citizenship, but also give up his British citizenship in order to play for the struggling South Asian nation. It is an unusual hurdle that India have chosen to erect, and after months of correspondence with sports ministers and former manager Stephen Constantine, sadly, it now appears as though Batth has given up on his Indian aspirations. Centre-back, Niall Mason. Current free agent Niall Mason once had a very famous friend as a child at Real Madrid, where he would sometimes get to speak to David Beckham. Mason spent time in the La Fabrica youth ranks, and he and Beckham were briefly the only English-speaking players at the club. Mason's father is American, his mother is Indian, and he was born in Brighton, making him eligible to represent the US, India, or England. Mason has previously stated that England would be his preferred choice, but aged 24 and without a club, and having been convicted of a sex offence, that seems pretty unlikely at this stage. A very capable right-back or centre-back at League One level, Mason was convicted of committing sexual assault in a nightclub during his time at Doncaster Rovers, which saw him released by the club. He won promotion to the Championship at Peterborough United last season, but was released by the club following that success, and a recent trial with Dundee was quickly halted after supporters protested his presence at the club on account of his crimes. Left-back, Neil Taylor. Without doubt one of the star men in this side, Neil Taylor is probably the best known player in the British game who is of Indian descent. Taylor's mother is Indian and was born in Kolkata, meanwhile his father is Welsh. Taylor was born and raised in Wales, beginning his career at Wrexham, before starring in the Premier League for Swansea City, and he won 43 caps for the Welsh national team before retiring from international football in 2019. Taylor spent the past 4 years playing for Aston Villa, having joined the club as part of a swap deal involving Jordan Ayew, but he was released by Dean Smith's side at the end of last season. That means that the 32-year-old is currently a free agent, like Niall Mason, but he has recently been linked with the likes of Middlesbrough and Celtic, and he is still among the standout names within this 11. Central midfield, Sarpreet Singh. Quite possibly the highest potential player in this 11, and someone capable of working wonders for the representation of South Asians at the highest level in European football, which would be a huge moment for football in the region. Sarpreet Singh is currently contracted to Bayern Munich. Born in Auckland, New Zealand, to Indian parents, Singh describes himself as a typical Punjabi who grew up in a typical Punjabi household. The 22-year-old moved to Munich in 2019 after impressing in the A-League with Wellington Phoenix, joining the Bavarians for over £500,000. A versatile and gifted midfield operator who can play in central midfield, attacking midfield, or out wide on the left, Singh's playing style has been likened to Mesut Ozil's by some sections of the German press. Currently on loan with Jan Regensburg in the second Bundesliga, Singh has won 6 caps for New Zealand to date, with whom he should become a star man, and he would undoubtedly be one of the star men within this 11. Central midfield, Harmeet Singh. Making it an all-Singh affair in midfield, Harmeet and Sarpreet Singh are of no relation, but they would both be huge assets to the Indian national team. Harmeet Singh will be the midfield sitter in this side, dropping deep and dictating the tempo of games, which is something that he has done so well for a number of Scandinavian clubs over the past decade. Nicknamed the Norwegian Iniesta and once singled out for praise by Pep Guardiola, Singh was born in Oslo to Indian parents. Capped 5 times by Norway between 2012 to 2014, many feel Singh ought to have done more given his talents, and particularly his exploits at youth team level, where he was one of Norway's brightest underage players of a generation. Right wing, Daniel De Silva. A man whose spot in this 11 was as guaranteed as just about anyone's, Daniel De Silva could technically still represent India, if he jumped through all of the necessary hoops, but the chances of that are somewhere in the region of 0. Touted as being a wonder kid following his breakthrough with Perth Glory in the A-League, De Silva was subject to a €2.5 million Australian dollar bid from AS Roma in 2014. That offer was accepted, but the transfer was cancelled after Roma failed to pay Perth their first instalment of the cash. De Silva instead went out on loan to Roda in the Netherlands, but he is still playing in Australia now, recently having signed for A-League side MacArthur FC, where he will play alongside former Cardiff City duo Jordan Much and Craig Noone. De Silva is an inventive flair player who can play anywhere across the front three, and he made more than 30 appearances for Australia at various different youth levels. Attacking midfield, Manpreet Zakaria. Maintaining a youthful zeal to this side, and particularly to its forward line, Manpreet Zakaria is a 25-year-old wide man or number 10 who left Austria Vienna over the summer in a move to Sturm Graz. That means that you can watch Zakaria in the Europa League this season, since Sturm Graz finished third in the Austrian Bundesliga last season, though their current record is played 2, lost 2 in the Europa League group stage, following defeats to Monaco and PSV. Zakaria is a clever forward who works his socks off and has excellent movement, and he has been rewarded for his efforts in his start to life in Graz, bagging 6 goals in the opening 7 games of the season. That made him a nailed-on starter in this 11, and the Austrian-born potential but extremely unlikely Indian international could be one to keep an eye on if he can maintain this kind of form. Left wing, Luther Singh. There are more Singhs in this 11 than an evening at a karaoke bar. No, doesn't really work, does it? That would be songs. I'm sure you can do better in the comments. The point being, there are 5 players with Singh as either their forename or their surname in this 11, and Luther Singh is the last of them. Born in Soweto, South Africa, Singh's paternal grandfather was a Sikh from Punjab in the north of India. Singh came from a long line of semi-professional and amateur footballers, but he has gone one better, now playing for Danish Superliga tabletoppers FC Copenhagen and the South African national team. A pacey wide man who is at his best playing out wide on the left, but frequently cutting back inside onto his preferred right foot, Singh made his name in Portugal with Braga's B team and during a string of loan moves. He joined Copenhagen for over £1 million in the summer, and it seems probable that he could become a key man for Bafana Bafana over the next 5 to 10 years. Centre forward, Sunil Chhetri. Only the second actual Indian international in our starting 11, meaning that we have 2 true blue tigers at opposite ends of the pitch, sandwiched between some real talent of Indian descent. Sunil Chhetri is the best known Indian footballer of his generation and one of the most famous of all time. Now aged 37, Chetri has scored an incredible 80 goals from 125 caps for the Indian national team since 2005, which makes him the 5th highest scoring male international footballer of all time, and gives him a better goals per game record than the likes of Lionel Messi, Cristiano Ronaldo, and Robert Lewandowski within international football. Of course, some will point to the quality of the opposition that Chetri has scored those goals against, perhaps reasonably so, but you could make that case with many international accomplishments. Chetri has had stints outside of India at club level in the United States and in Portugal, but he failed to score in 4 appearances for the Kansas City Wizards and Sporting Club de Portugal's B team. Nonetheless, the fact that Chetri is still going strong now, as he approaches the age of 40, for both Bengaluru and the India national team is a heroic achievement worthy of recognition. And with the limited external competition, I think he is worthy of a starting berth, and would almost certainly be even more prolific playing in a team with, comparatively, so much talent. So that is my starting 11, and I would like to point out that if you're wondering at this stage where the hell Neymar is, based upon the thumbnail, I just thought that it would be quite funny to see how many people thought that Neymar might be eligible to represent India by FIFA's eligibility criteria, and what route they thought he would be able to do it via. Apologies for that. I assure you that he would have started were he actually eligible, but at least as far as I'm aware, he is not. My 7-man bench, and apologies if I butcher a few of these names, if not all of them, is made up of backup goalkeeper Ingvar Kale, who is Icelandic but is of Indian descent, plays in Iceland, is 37 years old, and who there appear to be no images of in the Getty database. Simranjit Thandi, who there is fortunately some photographs of, playing for England under-17s there, but now aged 21 and in Cyprus, and covering in defence on our bench. Canadian international Shamit Shome, currently of FC Edmonton, who offers strong competition for places in midfield. Former Netherlands youth team international Rajiv van La Parra, who will be very familiar to any Wolverhampton Wanderers or Huddersfield Town fans who might be watching, but now plays his club football in Greece. Yet another Aussie, in the form of Ryan Williams, who has been capped once by the Socceroos and has spent his entire club career in England. Our penultimate substitute, the young Jan Danda from Birmingham, whose father is from Punjab and who currently plays for Swansea City in the Championship, following 7 years as a youth team player at Liverpool. And last but by no means least, and apologies for that throat clearance there, the youngest of the lot, Dylan Markande, aged 20, who is one of the stars of Tottenham's under-23 side, and I know some at Spurs who are a little surprised that he hasn't yet been given a first-team appearance in one of the club's cup competitions yet. In charge of that eclectic bunch of rather varied talents, I think it would be fair to say, who are all united by their ties to the world's largest democracy, is former Norway international Thomas Pereira, who spent 12 years playing as a left-back for Viking FK and now manages the club's second team, with aspirations, no doubt, of one day taking on the top job. So that is it for today's video, but thank you all very much for watching, and thank you especially to all of our Indian subscribers. Give us a like if you enjoyed today's video, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed, of course, goes without saying, and have notifications turned on for the finest YouTube channel in all the land. That's supposed to be HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Instagram or on Twitter via the username @HITC Sevens on both, should you wish to do so.